Hello and welcome to Comic Drake, where I talk about comic books and my name is Drake. There's a really good chance that if you're already famous, you can just move to any other medium outside of the one that made you famous in the first place, and you can get relative success off of your name alone. So it's no real surprise about comic books being this big, huge industry that some people outside of the comic industry have tried to come in and make a name for themselves to various degrees of success. So today, I want to give you guys a little bit of an insight into some of the mainstream celebrities that have come into the world of comic books and tried to have some footing in there. It's interesting, and there's even some surprising ones, so let's take a look. CM Punk is best known for being a two-time WWE champion, and for his stint in the UFC. But did you know that he actually has a few noteworthy comic publications? Well, he started off with a short and comedic story at the end of the Thor Volume 4 annual in 2014, but that flew under the radar. A year later, he hopped over to DC Comics under their Vertigo imprint in order to write another short story for their Strange Sports series, but that too went pretty unnoticed. It wouldn't be until another year later that CM Punk would go back to Marvel and be handed the reins of a solo title of his very own with Drax. See, the Guardians of the Galaxy were pretty obscure until they hit it big in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and to hop on this newfound success, Marvel gave every single member of the main crew their own solo title. The 2016 Drax series would be the first time that the character has headlined a book in 11 years, and would try to better match the tone of the books with that of the movies. The end result was actually pretty good. It was a lighthearted adventure that was pretty fun to read, despite not having any real lasting impact on the character. I legitimately think that with some time and experience, CM Punk could turn into a solid writer, and I am seriously stoked to see what he puts out next. Growing up, the Goosebumps series was insanely popular around school, and I'll admit that I got into them quite a bit. Series creator R.L. Stine had a couple of small comic releases under his belt, but nothing too notable. That is until March 2017, when Stine came over to Marvel Comics to bring back one of their classic horror series, The Man-Thing. I typically try to pick up physical issues of new #1s as soon as they come out, but when Stine's Man-Thing hit store shelves, I actually had a hard time finding it, with both of my local comic shops selling out rather quickly. I totally get it. For many people, Goosebumps is synonymous with childhood nostalgia. There's just one problem though. Have you actually tried going back and reading any of those books these days? The writing is terrible, and Man-Thing was sadly no different. I suffered through the 5-issue miniseries, and what I found was an awkwardly paced and incoherent mess of a book that wasn't even so bad it's good in ironic hipster fashion. Seriously, the only thing that the book had going for it was the quote-unquote star power from the writer, and I'd be completely okay with never reading another Stine creation ever again. Speaking of childhood, I was a big fan of My Chemical Romance back in middle school. And by that, I mean that I pretty much only listened to the Black Parade album on repeat. Well, believe it or not, the MCR frontman Gerard Way is a massive fan of comics, and he even had a 2-issue miniseries of his own called On Raven's Wings, which was released by the indie publication Boneyard Press in 1994, when he was only 15 years old. Since then, Way has created the cult classic Umbrella Academy series over at Dark Horse Comics, which actually won the prestigious Eisner Award. That is no small feat, and is highly respected in the industry. With that on his resume, it's no surprise that these days, Way spends most of his time as a major player in the comic industry, as the head of his own imprint under DC Comics called Young Animal. As the imprint's main man, Way actually gets involved pretty heavily in the creative process, and writes 2 series. Doom Patrol, which is one of DC's oldest properties, and is even where we originally got Beast Boy, and Cave Carson Has a Cybernetic Eye, which is a revival of a classic DC adventurer series. Young Animal has seen great success, supplying readers with unique types of stories that we usually don't see in the mainstream space, and it is highly reminiscent of the golden days of DC's Vertigo imprint. I'm extremely impressed, and I hope that Gerard will continue to lead the way for new reading experiences. Okay, this should come as no real surprise, so I'll try to not spend too long on the subject. Kevin Smith is a comic book junkie, and regardless of if you love him or hate him, I honestly think that Smith has pretty much as much push in the comic industry as he does in film. Kevin Smith has written some great stories for both Marvel and DC, including one of my all-time favorite runs in all of Daredevil's history. But I'm legitimately curious as to why both of his passions haven't converged more frequently. I mean, yeah, he's directed an episode of The Flash and one of Supergirl, but the dude has written for big characters like Batman, Spider-Man, Daredevil, and Green Arrow. I'm honestly just surprised. Regardless, Smith's heavy involvement in the comic scene is one of the biggest that we've seen from celebrities, and he's at least worth giving a bit of recognition in this video. Alright, so this might surprise you, but Samuel L. Jackson is really into comics. And in fact, it's his regular reading that led him to discover his likeness being used for Ultimate Nick Fury back in 2002, which ultimately landed him the role of Nick Fury in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In fact, we did an entire video talking about the before and after of that encounter, so I guess you should go watch that. Shameless self-promotion aside, Jackson co-wrote a comic series in 2010 for Boom Studios titled Cold Space, alongside Eric Cauldron, whom Jackson worked with on the Afro Samurai movies. Cold Space isn't a bad book, but it's just an uninspired 4-issue sci-fi story. The main character Mulberry is very clearly just Samuel L. Jackson in space, who boils down to a lot of the galactic badass space criminal tropes that we have seen time and time again. The title looks and reads like it is seriously just trying to get adapted into a movie or a TV show. But hey, at least Jackson was actually trying to present an original story instead of just cashing in on his personal brand alone. It's like a lot of celebrities will do endorsements just to try to get popular. But another good example of someone with an original story was actually Mark Hamill. It's nothing new for the comic industry, but some people will actually write comics to be strictly sold as screenplays. In fact, Mark Hamill got on this by co-writing a comic that was originally being pitched around as a screenplay that he was wanting to direct, called The Black Pearl. Honestly, I haven't read this book because no matter where I've looked, I simply cannot find a copy at any of my local comic shops. It looks like the publisher, Dark Horse, hasn't re-released Black Pearl in a good while, or even made it available digitally. From what I've read online, The Black Pearl stars a character named Luther Drake, no relation, who is a vigilante that gains some sort of media exposure after stopping a kidnapping. Hamill wanted the series to focus less on superhero antics and more on, quote, sensationalism, tabloid journalism, and all the things that thrillers come from. I'd seriously be interested in giving the series a read if I ever stumble across a copy in the wild, but by no means am I making it a must-find for my collection, because I heard it's frankly not that great. Maybe someday Mark Hamill will finally lock down funding to get his pet project off the ground, but after several attempts, it's not looking likely. Finally, let's move from Star Wars to Star Trek. That's right, William Shatner tried so hard to be a multimedia icon that not only did he have that cringeworthy music career, but he also tried his hand at being a novelist. Here's the thing though, Shatner's books weren't even written by him, and were instead created by ghostwriters. That's writers, not writers. Which does actually bring to mind that it would be interesting for William Shatner to play Ghost Rider, but I digress. The sci-fi novel series Tech War, written by Shatner, was adapted into TV movies, a video game, a TV show, and of course, comics. Now, if that wasn't interesting enough, because frankly it really isn't, another one of his books, Manowar, was adapted into a digital comic series after an Indiegogo campaign in 2015. This whole thing is super baffling, so let me just walk you through it. The Manowar brand was licensed by Shatner to a company called L&L Partners for a, quote, cinematic graphic novel to be read on an app called Panelfly, the website of which is no longer active. Now get this, the book actually surpassed its campaign goal of $5,000 with 37 backers. And it's worth noting that nearly half of the funding actually came from a single anonymous backer who pledged $2,500 to be included as a character in the book. The videos featured in the campaign were hosted by a YouTube channel that has deleted its account since, and they're no longer available. But here's a snippet of one that I was able to find. honestly, it just blows my mind that this project was even made in the first place, and I'm just really fascinated by the journey that this 1996 book that Shatner had made, and I'm just really glad that I could share this interesting and strange bit of trivia with you. In my experience, most of the celebrities that come in and try to make comics typically don't do a very good job, but every so often you do get one or two that really are surprising and make some pretty interesting books. So hopefully this was educational and hopefully you learned a little something new in terms of comic book trivia. But of course, these videos would not be possible without all of our amazing supporters over on Patreon. Badasses like Taylor Adams, Yosh Flores, Bonnie Davies, Ashley Donson, Billy Lewis, and Sebastian Walker. And you can see even more names of our supporters down there in the description below. But if you like this video, then why not consider subscribing or watching another one? You can learn even more trivia and fun facts here on the channel, and hopefully I'll see you next time.